Hello and welcome back to What the Falk at the Euros. We've covered them both on this podcast extensively, and as we enter the knockout stages, England do march on to what looks like a tricky last 16 tie after a 1-0 win over the Czech Republic. But for Scotland, they fell at the first hurdle yet again, and they're outclassed by Croatia in a game that they simply had to win. And to join me today on the reaction show is one Englishman and one Scot. First and foremost, I'll introduce you to a familiar voice and a man who'll be slightly happier than the other, Mr. Jack Shields. How are you doing, mate? You all right?
I'm pretty good, yeah. I'm pleased to be in the European Championships as one or two of our neighbours on. But no, looking forward to the rest of the tournament. Looking forward to seeing how we get on and progress, hopefully. But let's see what happens.
Bragging rights till Tuesday, I think, isn't it?
I know, yeah.
On the flip side, as I said, we will have one Scot. And second most. And sadly, actually, probably for the final time to be discussing Scotland during the Euros is the daily records, Gabe McKay. Gabe, obvious question maybe, but how you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Looking forward to getting back to supporting whoever England are playing rather than having a team to support at the competition.
To be fair, I was going to say, have you had to do that before? But I know the answer to that. I'll start with you, Gabe, to be honest. You weren't obviously on the preview show, but Scott, as ever, thought Scotland could do it. I was there to see the game. I ultimately thought that you could as well. I think ultimately we probably all underestimated Croatia a little bit. And Scotland, sadly, fell at the group stages for about the 40 millionth time in their history. It's almost 24 hours after the event, but how are the emotions following the game?
It's actually sort of, in a way, a relief not to go out in heartbreaking Scotland fashion and just to get beaten by what was just a better team on the day. I mean, we were well beaten, so it wasn't one of those which I think I predicted on the last time I was on that we'd be 1-0 up in the 93rd minute or something and they'd equalise and we'd go out that way. We were just beaten by a better team on the day. So in a way, it's kind of a bit of a relief because you know you didn't deserve anything more from it. It wasn't a sort of hard luck story. It was just a better team beating you on the day.
It was a weird way for Scotland to go out because obviously, like I say, I was at the game and I've got mountains of Scottish friends, Scotland supporting friends, and the person I share a bed and a house with is Scotland mad. And I think you were all expecting to maybe do something and conceding in the last minute and stuff like that. And it was weird. Sort of Croatia scored straight away. Then you pulled it back, probably against the run of play. But second half, it was I don't know if it was outclassed or I don't know if they'd ran the legs out in the England game. I don't know. What did you make of it?
I thought right from the start it was kind of all heat and no light. They were obviously very up for it and were really going for it, but there wasn't much more to it than a sort of manic intensity. There didn't seem to be much strategy in it. Now, obviously, of course, there would have been strategy. They'd have been working on it before the game, but it just seemed like they were kind of charging about without really having much of a game plan to it, whereas Croatia, maybe the first 10 minutes, they sort of weathered a little bit of a storm. After that, you saw they got set on the ball. And as we talked about, I think, before the tournament, when you look at, Croatia aren't quite the team they were, but they were in a World Cup final 3 years ago, and that midfield, Modric needs no introduction. Brozovic plays for the Italian champions. Kovacic plays for the European champions. And once they got settled into the rhythm and on the ball, it was a real tough night, I thought.
It was quite funny. The guy in front of me, Motherwell fan, speaking all night, and he's followed Scotland all over the world. And he went at half-time. No, after he scored the second one, after Croatia scored the second one, he said, I'd convinced myself that this Croatian team was aging and we could do something, but when I realistically look at it, we were relying on a 19-year-old to handle players who play for Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, Real Madrid. He's like, I think in reality, the hopes probably got too much for us. There's a few people criticising Scotland, and we'll come further onto it and deeper into that. But do you think that ultimately it was actually a really tough group in hindsight?
I think it was. I think apart from obviously the group with Portugal, France and Germany in it, it is one of the tougher groups. I mean, as we said, I think a lot of people underrated the Czech Republic. I think they're better than a lot of people thought they were. I mean, I think on here we actually said before the tournament that they were probably a little bit underrated. England we know about, and Croatia, okay, they're not the team they were in 2018, but they're coming from a peak of being in the World Cup final, which is a pretty big peak. So even if you decline from that a little bit, you're still a very good team. So I think if you look at in the cold light of day, Scotland probably do have the weakest squad in that group. There were mistakes, there are criticisms to be made, which I'm sure we can come on to. But ultimately, to finish bottom of that group is probably, if you're looking at it purely coldly and objectively, what you would expect.
Yeah, true. Jack, on a more of a positive note with England, I think we are through. We've conceded none, but we seem at like half pace. I think the kindest way I can put it is it's not been the most enthralling of tournament games from England. And obviously I was at the Scotland game yesterday, but I've caught up on the 90 minutes. And the second half, I think I was almost like tempted to put catfish on. And it's really not like me, to be honest. And I know the game was almost meaningless, but we're heading into the knockout stages. We've kind of, you can't say we've limped there because we haven't conceded a goal, but no one's really massively excited. How are you feeling about England at Euro 2020 so far?
A bit the same, really, Graham. I think I agree with them on Scotland as well. Just touching back on Scotland, I think no disrespect intended at all, but I think everyone expected Scotland probably to finish bottom of the group, and I don't think they've disgraced themselves too much. Particularly the point against England was a good battling point. They deserved a draw, so no disgrace for them. It was a tough group. I would agree with you. But in terms of England, I think I agree. We haven't really got going yet, have we? I mean, in spells in all three games, Graham, I think, well, not so much against Scotland, but the other two games, Croatia and Czech Republic, in spells we have played well. We have created chances. We have played at an intensity and had opportunities, but we haven't done it collectively for a large period or over a full game. I thought last night for the first half were excellent. We had players running in behind. Sakho, Grealish, Sterling was running in behind. Harry Kane was sharper, even though he didn't get the goal, everyone's looking for. And we looked like we had more pace and energy, which was the one thing we were crying out for against Scotland, was just somebody to break in behind, somebody to take a chance, somebody to run in behind and create something to stretch the defence. And I thought first half yesterday we really did that. I thought, Sterling hit the post. He scored the goal. We could have had maybe one or two others. Probably could have been 2 or 3 at half time. And everyone's thinking this is a bit more like it. And then second half, I don't know whether it was just because we were already through or whether we have to give the Czech Republic a little bit of credit for getting on the ball. But we were just a bit passive for me. We were just too willing to just sit back, get in shape and say to the Czech Republic, well, you can have all of the ball. You're not gonna score. And ultimately they didn't, and we won the game. So people might say, well, what's he talking about? We've got 7 out of 9 points and 3 clean sheets and we're top of the group. But our worry with football is I don't think you can turn it on. You can't just turn it on and say, well, we're going to play then and not play. We haven't really got going yet at the tournament, and that's a bit of a worry because whether it's France, Portugal or Germany, all 3 of those are probably going to give us harder matches than we played at the minute, and they're going to be able to attack us more with better players. So for us to say to them, well, we're going to sit in shape and defend and be passive against them, I'm not really sure is the best way to play, because I think if you're looking at the England team, where's our strength? It's probably going forward, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's creating chances. It's getting the likes of the players that I touched on. You Grealish, Sakho, Foden, Mount. I know he might not be playing, but Jadon Sancho, those type of players, that's where our strength is. And I don't think we've really allowed them players to really flourish at the minute. So, yeah, I'm happy we're through. Don't get me wrong. But, yeah, I'm hoping it's a bit of a slow burner and we'll get better as the tournament goes on.
I was on another podcast as a guest, which was a bit disorientating, if I'm honest. But one word that I used and every guest on the panel used was intent, and therefore the lack of it with England. Scotland the Scotland game had a huge lack of intensity. Scotland worked for it, and it made it so incredibly easy for Scotland to defend against when we passed it along the midfield and the back. I think Croatia was probably the best of the 3 performances based on the quality they've got and the fact that we were clearly the better side. But like you say, yesterday, after the first half, again, it was lack of intent. Is that coming from the team being just knackered, or is that Southgate's instructions? What do you think?
I think perhaps a little bit of both. I think Gareth Southgate, he's quite a manager that thinks, you know what I mean? He's someone that might plan ahead, and he might think, well, look, we did this in the World Cup 3 years ago, and we managed to get to the semi-finals by kind of managing our squad and, you know, not peaking too early and getting by. And I think he has that in mind, but also I think the players at the minute, I think are just where we're already through type thing, you know what I mean? And there's always going to be a second chance in the group, you know what I mean? Like, if worst comes to the worst and Scotland beat us, we would always have the second chance, you know what I mean, against Czech Republic of winning. Whereas in the last 16, the knockout stages, there is no second chance, you know what I mean? We're going to be playing a very good team, whoever it is. And that's what I mean. You can't turn on when you're going to be intense and turn on, you know, when you're going to be playing, you know, at the highest level and things like that. So it's a little bit of a worry. I mean, we might end up developing and getting better. In the last 16, we might play our best match and beat them. I think this England team's certainly capable of beating either France, Portugal or Germany. But likewise, all three teams are capable more than easily of beating England as well. So I think there's definitely, I think there's another gear to go up from England. I definitely think there's another gear. I'm just hoping we find it. And I think we've got a week now. We've got a solid week now. I'm just watching, I think Hungary have taken the lead against Germany. I think we've got a solid week now whereby we should be preparing and get whatever it takes to get that intensity level up so we approach the last 16 game in the right way.
We'll come further on to this later on, but obviously for the sake of the podcast, that's probably going to change the Hungary-Germany score. But whilst we're at it, Hungary are nowhere near the strong footballing nation that you would fear in the last 16. Yeah, they've got a draw against France. They were horrendously unlucky against Portugal, and they've just took the lead against Germany. They may go on to get battered 5-1, all right, by the end of this podcast. And I would imagine the Germans, as they always do something to pull that back. But Hungary have never been out of any of those games. Is it fair to say that we're sitting here a bit worried about who we're going to play the last 16, who we're playing, when realistically the teams that we're playing having flashes shown that they're good exactly the same as we have, so there's nothing too much to fear?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think France, I still think France are the favourites, but I watched them, they've won one and drawn one, and, you know, see how they get on tonight. Portugal conceded a lot of goals against Germany. Germany weren't great against France first game, and then, like you say, Hungary, who are going to be whipping boys of the group, are shown that they might have a chance, you know what I mean, and that they might graft and actually, with a bit of luck, get through. So I know what you mean, and I think there hasn't been any team. There's been, you could argue Italy, but I think there hasn't been a team that you pin on and say, yeah, they've been superb out in front on their own. I think everybody's had good spells within games, and I think England have to a certain extent. Not saying England are the favourites, far from it. I get what you're saying. It is a pretty open Euros. I think it's going to be interesting in the knockout stages to see who kind of grasps the initiative.
Grasps the nettle, as Howard Wilkinson would say.
Exactly, yeah.
Grasps the nettle. Before we move back onto Scotland, there's two things I wanted to sort of chat about with England. When I watched the game, I wouldn't have took him to the tournament. I think I said it in the preview show, but we did, and he was probably our best player yesterday, Bukayo Saka. I think he's a cracking little player, and I think he was our standout player yesterday. You cannot really deny it. Jack Grealish, obviously, I love Jack Grealish, and I'm in a relationship with him in my own head. But the fans have been calling out for him to start. He gets an assist again yesterday. That's his third assist in 9 England games. I think it's the highest, or one of the highest from the whole England team. Do you continue with Bukayo Saka and Jack Grealish in the next game?
Definitely Grealish. I would definitely be starting Grealish in the last 16. Saka, he deserves it. Don't get me wrong, he really deserves it. And I think I wouldn't argue if he was, but I think he may potentially just go with a Phil Foden or someone of that nature who's maybe just a little bit have more big game experience. That's not to say I would be, if Southgate started Saka, I wouldn't say, oh, well, that's a terrible decision. He's warranted it on his performance. But I think Southgate might just drop him off the bench, and I think he would be a fabulous option from the bench if we need a goal for him to bring on. Because what I liked about him last night was he was going at it. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't
fearless, isn't
he? Yeah, but he wasn't. He was just willing to take players on, and I think you need at this tournament, you need someone that's willing to take players on. No good just playing players that are going to sit and square ball it all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because we've seen already that we're struggling to break teams down, and I think it was those players running in behind that really stretched the Czech defence last night, more so the first half than they did the second half. But we've shown we can do it, but just in flashes. And it would be nice if we could have it more. And I think playing players like that would definitely open us up to creating more opportunities.
I heard a little vibration there, and you were speaking about Saka and the way he played quite passionately. Have you got your dildo out?
No, mate. No, I've got no WhatsApps about the group chat saying, "Oh, one hungry and one all that." So no, I have not got my dildo out. I don't have. I don't own a dildo.
Yeah, you say that now.
Graham does, and it's called Jack Grealish.
Regarding the final kind of thing I want to discuss, we've discussed Saka, we've discussed Grealish, we've chucked a bit of Foden in there. None of them have got tournament experience, and apparently Jadon Sancho has not been played because of that, unless I've misinterpreted it. I was watching a German guy this morning on Sky Sports, and he's perplexed as to why Jadon Sancho's not playing. And I think the whole of Germany is. I've got a few friends over there that are just like, what? Why? Like, they're just dumbfounded by it. Is something gone on there? Am I reading too much into that? Because Jadon Sancho surely has more big game experience than all of them, if not tournament experience.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, Graham, I don't watch a lot of the Bundesliga, so I haven't watched Jadon Sancho a lot. But the times I have watched him, he's looked more than capable of handling it at international level. You know what I mean? He plays for a big football club in Germany, so I can't see really anything hugely phasing him. And yeah, if that's the excuse, I'd rather Southgate just come out and said, look, we've got lots of options, and at the minute, he's one I'm looking at, but I'm preferring other options, rather than if it is Southgate, or if that's the excuse, it's a pretty flimsy excuse, in my opinion. I think the problem we've got, Graham, is we have a lot of good players, but they're all really in the sort of attacking midfield, attacking wing, area. And we've got a lot of. I would happily trade a good attacking midfielder that we've got for like a really good centre half or a really top class centre mid. You know what I mean? I think that would really push us up into one of the best teams of the tournament. So, as I say, I haven't seen a lot of Sancho. He's impressed me when he has played, but I think it's just a matter of we've got so many options at the minute in that kind of same role. There's going to be 2 or 3 at least disappointed every game, and there's going to be fans saying, well, why has he not played him? It was Grealish against Scotland. Why has he not played Grealish? Last night, it's why has he not played Jadon Sancho? If he plays Jadon Sancho and we get to the quarterfinals, it'd be why has he not played so-and-so? So do you know what I mean? It's going to be someone unhappy all the way, but I would definitely think of... I'm surprised, I agree with you, that he hasn't featured a little bit more.
Yeah, same. Really surprised, in fact. Back to Scotland, we're talking about selection dilemmas. One selection that really, really surprised and almost actually annoyed me, to be honest, Gabe. Grant Hanley had a good tournament, to be fair to him, based on what I think people expected him to have. He's got his limitations, but he did very well. When he went off, that's obviously not good news, because I think he was holding his own up until he went off, obviously. And then everyone around me, as he's going off, goes, oh, well, I would bring Declan Gallagher on. Someone else goes, no, you bring Liam Cooper on. Lo and behold, he brings Scott McKenna on. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to throw anyone under the bus, but he was the least person I expected as an actual Scotland fan. Gabe, what did you make of the decision?
Well, I actually tweeted when he came on just the words, "Oh Christ, not Scott McKenna." So, I that was baffling to me. I mean, I assume the logic being Hanley's a sort of big, brawny kind of guy, and he wanted the most like for like he could get. But I mean, I've never particularly rated McKenna, and I think the first thing he did was to get booked for clattering
30 seconds, wasn't it? Yeah, 30 seconds.
So no, that one I thought was very, very odd. I mean, given he barely featured. I mean, he came off the bench in both the friendlies, I think, but at left centre back for Tierney, I guess, in a rehearsal for if you're at the tournament and you want to shut the game down for 10 minutes and you need someone that can head it. So to bring him on when Hanley went off injured, I thought was bizarre. I personally would have gone for Cooper, but yeah, okay, if not, go for Declan Gallagher. But yeah, the decision to go with McKenna, I just thought was bizarre, and he didn't have a shocker, but you know, as I said, he came on and within about 30 seconds had been booked for just clumsily tackling. I think he was the guy went to go past him on his right and he couldn't use his right foot, so he had to sort of shuffle round on his left and just clattered him, and it was just clumsy and exactly what I think everyone feared when they saw him coming on.
I think it's fair. Again, every goal you lose is a goal you lose as a team, because it's in every moment you could have pressed better up top, you could have done this, that, and the other, or whatnot. But I think ultimately, when you're looking at it in the black and white, without the other transition to play and whatnot, McKenna was probably at fault for a few of those goals. He was out of position numerous times, and he just looked a little bit like he'd crapped his pants, which I can kind of understand. The atmosphere was absolutely electric, but I think on the pitch, it just really felt like Croatia handled it better, but also they were far classier. They just passed the ball better, and Scotland seemed to just chase after it and tire themselves out. I don't think the Croatia game realistically was the game where Scotland probably lost it, which seems weird because that means that I'm just pointing the finger at the Czech Republic game, which was probably a slightly better performance. But when you look back on the 3 games, what are the moments that you pinpoint Scotland as ultimately the failure and the things that you could have done different, the things you must work on moving forward?
I think, well, the large amount of missed chances, even yesterday when we were quite clearly second best. You know, McGinn misses a huge chance. Adams has a chance he doesn't make contact with to go 1-0 up. So there's that. I thought yesterday as well, I mean, Steve Clarke knows far more about tactics and stuff than I do, but I thought putting Armstrong in was a sort of strange decision that didn't really work. Modric ran the show, basically. I don't think Armstrong provides that sort of pressing or cutting out the passing lanes that I think you need against a player like that. And I think you could see, I watched the game back. I haven't watched it last night. I watched the game back in preparation for this. And, it was sort of like the first 10 minutes where it was quite intense and Modric were just kind of floating around the pitch. And it was like, in Jurassic Park, when Muldoon's talking about the velociraptors trying different bits of the fence to see which bit's weak.
Yeah.
After about 10 minutes, Modric just kept popping up on that right-hand side where Armstrong was. And if you look, if you watch the game back and you look at like where he was sort of operating, it was in that area. And I think that's because he's obviously a hugely intelligent player and he knows where to pick up space and he knows where the danger is. And I think Armstrong didn't do enough to deal with him. I don't think it was entirely his fault. You also had, who was it? Juranovic, the right back was bombing on, and the boy that was at Everton, Vlasic, sort of coming inside, and Tierney was sort of like following him inside, and that meant Robertson was getting pushed back by their right back, and I sort of thought in that game, well, if Modric is going to be operating in that area, get Robertson, who can run all day up, pressing him and harrying him, and don't give him that time on the ball. And if you're Tierney and Vlasic goes inside, okay, it's a risk, but, well, we'll take that risk because he's a good player, but he ain't Modric. And if you need to snuff one guy out of the game, it's Modric. So I thought we could have handled that better. The Croatia game, the Czech Republic game in the first game, again, it was just sort of silly mistakes. It's a set piece chance, and then we don't pick up the runner after that. And then, okay, it's an absolute worldie of a goal. And it was the same. It was the same against Croatia. Now, that Modric goal for 2-1 is a brilliant strike, but even more so than the Czech game. He picks it up in space on the edge of the box. I think all 3 midfielders were sort of around Kovacic, who never shoots anyway, but they all sort of got drawn to the ball. And, okay, with the Czech game, a guy scoring from just inside the half, that doesn't happen that often. If you give Modric time and space to shoot right on the edge of the box, it's going to go in the top corner more often than not, I would have said. So I think it was just sort of silly moments like that. I mean, finishing and just losing daft goals, really. I think the England game was the only one where you could say, I mean, I was on the review show, so we don't need to go over it again, but Stones hitting the post and Mount had a chance, but they never really looked like getting carved open by England, whereas last night there were numerous occasions where Croatia got in behind. I mean, you mentioned McKenna. There was one which I think eventually was flagged for offside where Marshall saved from Perisic and Modric just dropped the ball over his head. And you could actually see, watching it back, he was waiting to play that ball. He was waiting for him to come out. He picked it up on the touchline and sort of went to do it and then went no, and passed it inside. And then he got it again. And then he went down the line. He was waiting for McKenna to move out of position so he could drop the ball over his head. And that's what happened. So Yeah, I think numerous things, but I think there are also things to be positive about, which I guess we may come on to as well.
I think Andy Robertson said, and I don't think he used it as an excuse. I really don't, because I mentioned it myself beforehand. Scotland have the least amount of caps between themselves in the entire tournament, and that's something that doesn't matter how many tournaments you've been to or not. Like, you can pick up caps and friendlies and all sorts, and Scotland do have a young side, and you can understand and see how that's come to pass, that you've got the least amount of caps in the tournament. And I think ultimately there was an awful lot of naivety throughout the games. Hendry's shot that results in what would have been a break eventually ended up being a 50-yard strike. Unreal. On the flip side, you see the naivety of allowing Modric that space to shoot last night. It'll read as Scotland falling at the first hurdle again and going out in the group stages and an unfulfilled promise and a great chance to get through with the third place, and the chances that were missed in the first game. But I think ultimately, when you look at like the tournament experience I'll have from that as a Scotland fan, and I know we do like to look on the bright side of life as Scotland and England fans, and probably Wales fans as well. It's been a good tournament in that sense, hasn't it? It's going to give Scotland so much more heading into what hopefully will not be another 23 years for another tournament.
Yeah, I think it's the same both sides of the border, that when you get a good result, everything's fantastic. When you get a bad result, there are just some absolutely hysterical reactions. And I think there's been a lot of hysteria after the game last night. If you look at that team, as you say, so Robertson's 27, Tierney's 23 or whatever. Gilmore, who's come in, is just turned 20. Patterson, who should be the right back in the future, is 19. McTominay's still only 24. It's not like France 98, the last time we were at a tournament where it was sort of a lot of old stagers sort of going for the sort of last hurrah. Qualifying for a tournament is a big monkey off the back. There's a good core of players there, lacking in some areas, up front, and I think we'll need to find another goalkeeper from somewhere. But there's a good core of players there. There's a good manager there who's shown that he can get results. And you'd think that going into the World Cup and the next Euros, that core of players is the one that will be there. And they've got that tournament experience now, that when it comes to games like this, I mean, just look at Croatia last night. Now, they've had a bit more of a difficult tournament. They only had 1 point going into that game. But when it comes to the heat of the moment, their players, they've been there, they've done it, they know how to get a result in a game. As I said, they were ice cold all night, whereas Scotland looked frantic, looked harried. And I think that's the kind of thing you can only gain by playing in these tournaments, and having got that monkey off the back, as I said, after 23 years, you'd think next time that it'll be a lot more calm, a lot more experience, and they'll be much better equipped to make a real go of it next time.
That's it enough.
Maybe even a bit more realism as well. I think people got carried away because of the year that's been up to 18 months, the way that you qualified and stuff like that, they became heroes sort of overnight, when realistically they were still very much David Marshall of Derby County in a relegation fight that you can't even get your first team place. I think if you get qualified for Qatar, I think there'll probably be a little bit more realism and less excitement of how you can progress out of a tournament and how you can prepare properly and stuff like that. And it hopefully will be a bit of a more normal world by then as well.
Yeah, and I think you've got to remember that Clark came in sort of, obviously we got the playoff place through the Nations League, but he came in during the qualifying campaign where we'd been battered by Kazakhstan, which people forget. I mean, Croatia in 2018 were in the World Cup final and we were losing 3-0 to Kazakhstan. And I think it was only really around the playoff or just before that where we settled on the system. Players like Gilmore have just come into the team. So it was very much a team that was a work in progress going into the tournament. And now you'd think that there's that solid foundation that we can build from. And as you say, I mean, I would like to make clear when Scott and I were talking about winning it, we were joking. We didn't actually mean that. But yeah, I agree with you in general.
Scott did. Scott meant it. Scott told me. I've got the message. It's Photoshop, but I've got the message. Scott definitely told me that he would win it. And I told him in reply, his hair would come back before Scotland even get out of the group.
Or his sofa would arrive.
Oh, his sofa would arrive, yeah, which I still don't think it has, mate, to be fair. But obviously, we all know Hungary are going to win it. So I don't even know why we just discussed that. Really. The mighty Hungary, which I hope they do, because that'd be great. Hopefully, they'll get Wembley in the last 16, and that's where they fall. before I completely leave Scotland and going to England and we end today's short and sweet pod, I think I know the answer to this. I've got my own opinions on it, but there's been a bit of discussion around Steve Clarke, which there always is about every manager after every game, win, lose, or draw. It's either give him a 10-year contract, a la Alan Pardew at Newcastle, sack him tomorrow, sack him at half-time, sack him in the tunnel, depending on the result. I think he's a bit too cautious, a little bit too loyal for my liking, and I think he probably took Scotland maybe as far as he can. Obviously, you've seen a lot more of Steve Clarke, and you're a lot bigger fan of him. Would you change it, or do you think that would be silly?
Yeah, I think that would be silly. I think the building blocks are certainly there. Now, he's made mistakes during the tournament. We've discussed those. I think certainly starting Christie ahead of Adams in the first game was strange. Taking so long to put Gilmour in, it wasn't his fault. We couldn't play against Croatia, but taking so long to put Gilmour in. But I mean, I think a lot of the criticism that I've seen has come from people who are perhaps thinking with club loyalties in mind, if I can put it that way, and maybe have some preconceived opinions about Steve Clarke from other arenas than the Scotland job. No, I think, the guy got us to a tournament, which was his remit. Okay, we've come away with it with 1 point and only scoring once. I don't think, apart from the Croatia game, we ever really looked hugely out of our depth. I mean, even the Czech game, okay, they won 2-0, but we had the chances in that game.
You were in every game at some point.
Yeah, even the Croatia game, we got that equaliser before half-time. Now, they were by far the better team, but we still had chances, and we got that equaliser before half-time. So I think the foundations are there to build with. There seems to be, I mean, obviously you're never going to hear authoritatively, but there seems to be a good mood about the camp, which hasn't always been the case with Scotland. So I think making a change now as a sort of knee-jerk reaction to finishing bottom of a group that realistically with the squad, you probably would be favourites to finish bottom of, no sort of disgraceful performances after a 23-year wait. I think it would be, that's chucking the baby out with the bathwater. And don't forget, this is Steve Clarke's first international tournament, so he's going to be learning as much as what the players are. So he made mistakes. Maybe he won't make those mistakes next time.
Yeah, hopefully so. Jack, before we obviously leave the conversation completely, back to England. As we speak, we've talked about Hungary, but we don't really know who we're going to be playing. It looks like it's going to be one of Portugal or France. I think either way we look at it, there's a chance of Germany if they pull it back by the time this is released tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be Hungary, even if they do win tonight. I don't think they can get higher than third. So I'm going to go in with a positive mindset because I know a lot of people are going, I'd rather not face any of them, but we're going to have to face one of them. We're going to have to beat them at some point if we want to win any sort of tournament or get anywhere near. Who do you want? Who would you prefer to face?
Well, on tonight's show, I will say France. France are right off it tonight, aren't they? No, out of those three...
Cue France's 5-1 win.
It's difficult because, I mean, England fans have got the old, Germany. I personally would say Germany out of those three. Portugal, France and Germany. I'd rather face Germany. I know England fans have got bad memories of Germany. I know they tend to knock us out a lot in tournaments. One way or the other, whether it's Euros or World Cups, we always seem to come up against them. But I don't think this is a classic Germany team. I look at the team, I think it's efficient, it's hard work, and it's decent. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty good. But in terms of the German squads, this is way down on them. So if you had to ask me which three I would pick, I would probably pick them out of the three. But it's just annoying because the format means that Denmark, I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here. I've been ranting about it the last few days, to be honest. But Denmark lost 2 of their 3 group games, snuck through in third place, and then get Wales in the last 16. No disrespect to Wales at all. But we win our group and we're rewarded with France, Portugal or Germany. It just doesn't seem right to me. That
it's
I don't know how it's being organised. That doesn't seem right. But anyway, by the by, I think we've got to go into it. There's an old saying, isn't there? We have to beat the best to be the best. If we want to win the Euros, we're going to have to beat a couple of heavyweights along the way. Do I think we're going to win the Euros? No, probably not. I don't think we will. It would be nice to see us get a big win and maybe get to the quarters or the semis and then the belief built up. But it would just be nice to see a performance because we've got 7 out of 9 points, but we haven't really seen a really good England performance. So hopefully Tuesday, however it is in the last 16, we see a good England performance. And I think if we do play well against any of those 3, I don't think they'll fancy it against England with a home crowd behind us, with us playing really well and energetic and on the
40,000 fans as well.
Exactly. none of those three teams, Graham, will fancy playing England when England are on it with the English crowd behind us. None of them are fancy it. So let's have it. Let's perform and let's beat any of them.
I'm with you the same on Germany, I think, because I think Germany have the same level of deficiencies as England do. I think we're about on par. Both got world-class players, but both have deficiencies where you can be penetrated, whereas I'm not sure the French at top form actually have any. I know that sounds daft because Hungary got a result, and as the time speaking, Portugal have won a lot, but I feel like Portugal have Ronaldo that can drag you through any old shit, literally any shit, till he's about 50-year-old. And I think the French, if the French fancy it, they're just the best team in the world, and they're proving that. So for me, the Germans, which I never thought I'd say as a veteran of Euro 96 and old enough to remember Italia 90 to an extent. But either way, you're gonna have to beat someone to get what you want at the end, isn't it?
It's going to be a tough game, Graham, regardless of who we're playing. Anyone, we've not made a great deal of the group, and the groups, all three teams in the group are probably a lot weaker than whoever it is we're going to play. So we're talking about earlier, we need to find another level. Hopefully there isn't. We have to. Do you know what I mean? There's no ifs or buts, because if we don't produce it, we're going to be out. We're going to be out here before the quarterfinals. So it's bad luck. The draw's not good luck, but get on with it. Hopefully find that extra level with the English Wembley crowd behind us, get a good performance and nick a win and through the quarters, and then take it from there.
Before we go, Gabe, I'll come on to you. I think we've had a good look at the tournament. I don't know about you, but I've watched every single game. If I've missed it, I've watched it back. Actually, I tell a lie. I missed the Sweden game. I've got to watch that one back because obviously both played at the same time. But I think it would be fair enough to say we could probably have an idea who we think is going to win it. I'm going to go for Italy. I know it's the obvious answer, but I think the Italians unfancied at the start, and I think people have realised how good they are and how unbeaten they've been in so long that we're suddenly going, all right, okay. So they're still good, even though Andrea Pirlo's retired. So I think I said at the beginning Belgium, but I'm fancying the Italians now. But Gabe, going into the knockout stages, who's your tip?
Well, I'd like to say Italy were underappreciated by you and Scott. I always thought they were pretty good because I watch a lot of Serie A. Italy have certainly looked the strongest so far. You maybe have doubts when they come up against a France about how mobile the centre of that defence is, but certainly Italy look very strong. I'd say Italy or France. Italy have played the best, and I think France could field two teams that could win that competition. So those would be my two favourites.
I went with France earlier in the tournament, early before the tournament started. I know they're losing at the minute, but I still think they're going to be up there. But having watched Belgium, I'm looking at Belgium and I'm thinking, I know that people have talked about this golden generation for so long, and I just feel like this might be it. Do you know what I mean? I know people have said, well, they've said that the last 2 or 3 tournaments, but I'm looking now. I was watching De Bruyne, the way De Bruyne is playing the other night. Lukaku's firing up front. They've got Hazard. They've got the strength and depth. I'm just looking at Belgium and I'm thinking, players are at the peak now. They're not going to get better than this probably in the next time. And I just think this might be potentially could be their year as well. So, bit 2 answers, but I'd still go France, but don't be surprised if it's Belgium.
Yeah, perfect, lads. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a bit of a later reaction show, but I think we had to kind of do that because on Friday, all the Scottish people that wanted to come on the podcast were too pissed, and today they're pretty much all of them were too depressed. And I think, to be fair, as Englishmen, we're not exactly enthralled either. But stay with us. We will be with England, as we said we would be. Same with Scotland. Scotland's obviously gone now, but we'll previews, reaction shows with England all the way through. And if we do get knocked out sooner than we'd hope, we will still have obviously quarterfinal, semi-final, and final reaction, and then back into the depression of Sunderland Association Football Club afterwards. But thanks for joining, Jack and Gabe. Enjoy the rest of your night, lads.
No problem. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.